So today I'm going to talk about some news which is coming, particularly the hawks who are saying that India should be aggressive and teach a lesson to China for what they call as a misadventure in eastern Ladakh. And this is amplified by the self-serving jingoistic media, particularly Republic TV, Zee TV, and some Hindi news channels. And these people are doing a great disservice to India, and they want to destroy what is left of India. War never solves anything. Aggression will be replied by aggression. The same jingoistic feelings will be on the other side also. We are never going to achieve any durable peace by waging war. So today, that's why I thought I will talk about the various wars fought by India since independence. Throughout history, most of the wars have been fought for territory, the lure of the land, the lust for the land. Very few wars have been fought for other reasons like trading reasons. The one important thing which comes to my mind is the war fought in the medieval time by Rajaraja Chola and Rajendra Chola in Southeast Asia, that is believed to be for trading reasons. The Chola Empire, which has been founded on the wealth created by trade with China and Southeast Asia, they prevented Southeast Sailendra dynasty in what is present day Sumatra, prevented that trade, so a punitive expedition was sent. But other than that, essentially wars have always been fought for land, control of land. So the problem has been always with the erstwhile princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is the undivided, the thick black line which I am showing it to you is the original undivided state of Jammu and Kashmir. So this has been the bone of contention not only between India and Pakistan but also between India and China. So the beautiful vale of Kashmir, which some people call it as the heaven on earth, the Dogra kingdom, which was created on the demise of the Sikh kingdom after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. The Dogra kingdom, though the king was a Hindu, the undivided kingdom, which includes Ladakh also, huge area, landmass, but with very less population, low population density because of the mountainous terrain. At the time of 1947, 3/5 of the population was Muslim, both in the Kashmir Valley and also in most of the parts of Jammu region. Some areas which are present in India, Poonch and Rajouri, and most areas some areas which have gone to Pakistan of Jammu, Muzaffarpur area, northern areas, Kargil area in Ladakh, this is Kargil, and Leh of course is majority Buddhist, with the southern part of the Jammu region, Jammu, Kathua, Samba region and parts of Udhampur region, majority Hindu. But 3/5 of the population was Muslim. So the Maharaja, essentially Hari Singh, in 1947 wanted to remain independent. He wanted to become an independent king. But both India and Pakistan were pressurizing him to join with them. So he signed a standstill agreement with both India and Pakistan. That means that he wanted more time to decide whether to join with India and Pakistan. But India was close not only to Maharaja Hari Singh, who was a Hindu, but also to the most popular leader of Kashmir Valley at that time, the Sher-e-Kashmir, Sheikh Abdullah. So Pakistan was worried that ultimately Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir, the erstwhile state of the princely state of Jammu Kashmir, will join with India. So they sent tribesmen and irregular army men into the Kashmir Valley to occupy. So the Maharaja Ranjit Singh has no other alternative other than to sign the instrument of accession in October 1947, in which he acceded to India. So then India becomes part of India. So therefore India airlifted troops. The reason being airlift was there was, as you can see right now, the only road link right now between Punjab and Himachal is fully mountainous. The only present road link is through Pathankot region to Jammu, and from Jammu to this thing, there was no road from Jammu to Srinagar at that time. You have to go via Muzaffarpur or through the Punjab plains through Islamabad and then reach Muzaffarpur and then reach Srinagar. So India has to necessarily airlift and prevent the capture of Kashmir Valley by Pakistani supported tribesmen coming from northern areas. This is northern areas. So the war went on for more than a year till December 1948. The Indian army successfully drove out the invaders out of Kashmir Valley. The whole of Kashmir Valley is with India. Then after more than a year of war, of course everybody was battle weary. Then army chief said, we cannot keep on fighting a long war because we have shortage of ammunition, the soldiers are tired, and more importantly the terrain doesn't support us. If we take the war into northern areas, it is completely unknown territory with the temperatures plunging to -20, -30 in Gilgit and Baltistan, and we will be fighting the territory war in the tribesmen territory. So it is an unwinnable war if you take it further and try to retake huge areas where population is almost nothing. So we have captured the whole Kashmir Valley, so it is better that we stop the war. So the government also accepted, because the condition in 1947-48, it has seen the world's biggest ever migration, mass migration. India was very poor, we didn't have even food. So we had to beg food to, free food to, we didn't have even foreign exchange to pay for food. So our focus was on development, to resettle people who have come from what areas which have gone to Pakistan, and then to become food self-sufficient, to provide basic amenities to all the people. So rightly so, we decided through the aegis of United Nations, decided to end the war. India also accepted the then the UN resolution in 1948, which said that there should be freedom, should be the right of political rights should be given to the people. People of Jammu Kashmir should decide, not necessarily the king who has signed the instrument of accession with India, which is very legal, but let the people of whole united area of Jammu Kashmir, including Leh, Kargil, northern areas, Pakistan occupied Jammu areas, Jammu, Kashmir, everybody let them decide. Let us conduct a plebiscite or referendum to decide the political future, whether Jammu Kashmir should join with India or Pakistan or remain independent. But the condition, precondition, why India accepted? Because simple, that says that what the areas which are under Pakistani control right now in 1948 should be returned back to India, and India will conduct a referendum. So it was a win-win situation for India. But Pakistan never returned the areas which is under their control. It is what is called as Azad Kashmir by Pakistan. Map also says so, but the map has been taken from internet. So before the over enthusiastic people haul me over the coals for sedition, let me clarify that it is taken from internet. So the areas under Pakistani control, what is known as Pakistan administered Kashmir or Azad Kashmir, and the northern huge area called northern areas, has to be returned back to India, which Pakistan has never done so. So there was no question of India conducting a plebiscite. In 1953, India and Pakistan both agreed to conduct plebiscite in a bilateral agreement also, but by the time Cold War has started between US and USSR, and US did not want that to happen. They wanted Kashmir problem to keep going, so that they can play one against another. If they can play favorites, India versus Pakistan. So it never happened. So the war in 1948 was a limited success for India, because we drove out Pakistani irregular army out of the most populated areas, that is Kashmir Valley. So Kashmir Valley still stays with India. So that is the greatest thing. But we didn't pursue them because of the financial constraints, and also the army advising against such adventures, which will be very costly both in terms of men and material. So but the problem was always there, fermenting, the embers were always there. So the next war was waiting to happen. The next war happened in 1965. Before that, there was a war with Pakistan, China in 1962. I'll come back to that later. 1965, India was demoralized after the huge loss of territory. 1962, prestige and all that, and Nehru has died, and Pakistan felt that Lal Bahadur Shastri was a weak leader. He was just fresh, so they thought that they can again. They started creating trouble in this thing. They started sending material, arms, money, and all through a strategic pass called Haji Pass, which is not there in this map. Some are here in this area. So they created trouble in the Kashmir Valley. The valley was burning. There were a lot of anti-India protests, pro-Pakistan protests, and all that. So that led to clashes and all, and eventual war. 1965 war was essentially a stalemate. So Pakistan occupied a lot of areas in this particular area, that is Punjab, whereas India captured a lot of areas in southern parts, that is Rajasthan, Sindh belt, lot of desert areas. So, but it was again, it was, both countries are not able to achieve their target. India wanting to capture the areas, which are under Pakistani control since 1948, and Pakistan's dream of capturing Kashmir Valley. So, it didn't happen. Both sides was essentially a stalemate. So, US was busy with Vietnam War at that time. So, it didn't play any role. In the Soviet Union, USSR played the role of the mediator. So it called both Indian and Pakistani prime ministers to Tashkent. The present it was in Uzbekistan, then part of Soviet Union, and an agreement was signed, and both countries exchanged the territories they captured. So military analysts at that time said that India should not return the Haji Pir strategic pass in the Himalayas, through which Pakistan will again send troops. But Lal Bahadur Shastri overruled them. He said, we want peace. We have to settle it, because if you don't give Haji Pir Pass, then Pakistan will not give many places it has captured in Punjab. So we have to end war, and if you don't, then USSR, which was then a friend of India, will be angry with India, and that's the only country which is supporting India in Security Council. As you know, US was completely pro-Pakistan during the Cold War time. So there could be very strong, Security Council resolutions against India. So we have to accept what the Soviet Union, because Soviet Union wants to increase its prestige in the global arena by making both India and Pakistan accept the peace plan given by it, that is exchange of territories and exchange of all the prisoners of war, which India agreed, because we want a durable peace. So, but again things started coming, and 71 war came. 71 war was not necessarily over Kashmir, even though battles were also fought there, but essentially on the eastern front in Bangladesh, where India captured the whole of Bangladesh and created a new country. East Pakistan then became Bangladesh, and 90,000 Pakistani soldiers in East Pakistan surrendered to Indian army, and India also took some territory again in Punjab, Sindh area. Then in 1972, there was a peace conference in Shimla. So India being definitely the undisputed winner in the 1971-72 war. That was a tactical masterstroke by Indira Gandhi, because she waited, because we know that Pakistan and China have become very close friends by that time, and China will definitely help Pakistan. So she waited for the winter. So the passes to, in winter, because of the snow in the Himalayas, China cannot attack India, because then we have to fight a two-front war, and the liberation of Bangladesh would be impossible. So she waited for the winter to set in, and therefore only in December India started attacking East Pakistan to liberate it. And the world opinion was also favorable to India because of the atrocities committed by Pakistani army in East Pakistan, and the millions of people who have migrated to India. So morals and ethics were also supporting India, and we also signed an agreement to prevent US supporting Pakistan during the war. She also signed an agreement with the Soviet Union that if any country attacks India, then Soviet Union will jump into war. So US didn't want to start a World War III, particularly after licking the wounds of Vietnam War at that time. They were no mood to they were politically, morally supporting Pakistan in the international arena, including Security Council, but they didn't enter the war on the side of Pakistan, which enabled India to decisively defeat Pakistan in the 1971-72 war. But we cannot gloat on the winning war, because the issue is there. What is that issue? The land, Kashmir, is still there. So we have to be magnanimous in victory. So Indira Gandhi called Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the then Pakistani Prime Minister, to Shimla, and we signed an agreement under which India gave back the 90,000 soldiers we captured during the war. and we also transferred the 9,000 square kilometers of territory, mostly in the wastelands of the Thar desert we captured in Sindh. So, but the most important thing, success of that 1971-72 war was what is presently known as LAC, LOC, line of control, which is de facto border between India and Pakistan since then, was signed at that time. So you can see very clear. Oh, it's not that. So this is the dotted line, which you can see is the LOC. So we've been able to sign that LOC, which Pakistan also just it is unlike in the last video I said that the problem between India and China in Ladakh is there is no boundary at all. But here we have a boundary. You can see all the dotted line up to this point. The problem is only up to this point. Otherwise, it is very easy. The line is very, very clear. There is no, because both sides have agreed onto the map. By 1970s, all surveys have been done, and there is absolutely no dispute about what is about line of control. Of course, India says that all the areas of Wurzweil state of 1947 J&K is part of India. Pakistan claims on the basis of religion the whole of Kashmir Valley and other parts of Jammu, which are Muslim majority, as its parts. But there is no debate or no issue, no doubts about line of control. So when Pakistan does some misadventure like the Kargil misadventure in 1999, when they clearly crossed the line of control and occupied the places which are under Indian control as per 1972 Shimla agreement, India showed immediately to the international community, particularly US, the maps of 1972 which Pakistan has also agreed, and the satellite pictures of 1999 which Pakistan has clearly transgressed onto Indian territory. So it prevented a large scale war in 1999 because US put enormous pressure under Clinton, put enormous pressure on Pakistan to withdraw from Kargil. So India can use also air power because Pakistan has accepted that this area, all the wars fought, you remember Tiger Hill and all the things etc. India used air power to neutralize the Pakistanis who are dug up there. So the world opinion was completely supporting India because LOC agreement was signed in 1972 that prevented a full-fledged war in 1999. But still there is some problem because the issue is same problem. The Kargil, the 1975 war stopped at this particular point. I have marked it with I'll mark it with red here. Yeah, this point is called NJ9842. This is 99842. So the map LOC signed by India and Pakistan in Shimla Agreement 1972 clearly states that the LOC is still NJ9842. Beyond that, it says the line goes north. So India says north here means like this, whereas Pakistan says north here means like this. So there is a dispute in this particular area. This is known as Siachen Glacier. So still India controls this area right now. The heights of this is in Karakoram mountains, specifically called the Saltoro range, Siachen Glacier, very close to Mount K2. Mount K2 is somewhere here. Karakoram Pass is again very close by, through which China and Pakistan constructed an all-weather road. Karakoram Highway also passes through the Shashkam Valley. So the Siachen Glacier is still the bone of contention. We have not yet agreed upon that. So still that prevents any settlement. But this area, why we have not mentioned in 1975 war, because as I showed you, these are all 7,000 meter and winter temperatures are -40. Every year both Indian and Pakistani soldiers, hundreds of them die, not because of enemy fire but because of frostbite. So we have to spend thousands of crores of rupees every month just to replenish the stores of the soldiers stationed in the Siachen Glacier. You can see that white mark there. That is the Siachen Glacier, the world's highest ever battlefield with the average height of more than 6,000 meters on the mighty Karakoram range, the roof of the world. So that is one small area which is disputed. Otherwise, India and Pakistan have a very settled boundary called line of control. Any future agreement between India and Pakistan must take the ground realities into control. So hopefully LOC will become the accepted international border. Yes, there are some small dispute between India and Pakistan also exists. That is in Gujarat Sindh boundary, what is known as Sar Creek. Very small. Creek is a small inlet of the sea into the land. So India says that the Sar Creek, the boundary should be in the middle of the creek. Pakistan claims the whole creek as its own territory. So that is the small dispute, because that is over some exclusive economic zone in the sea, which could have some future oil and gas deposits. But that is a very small dispute compared to the big Kashmir dispute. So this is the big problem. Of course, the 1962 war with China, 1960, Zhou Enlai, the Chinese Prime Minister, came to India after signing a border agreement with both Nepal and Myanmar, and he offered a very honorable peace deal. So Aksai Chin, by the time China has constructed an all-weather road from Tibet to Xinjiang. So I have mentioned about all that in my previous video. People who have doubt, please refer back to that video. He said de facto it is under their control. So he said, you accept Aksai Chin as our territory, and in lieu of that, Arunachal Pradesh, we will drop our claims over it. We will recognize Arunachal Pradesh as your territory. But India refused. There was a beautiful book written by one Mr. Maxwell, India's China War. In that he says that Nehru was unnecessarily nationalistic or patriotic in that. The deal was a very good deal for India, both for India and China, who were developing countries at that time, and he should have taken it. But probably the media pressure on him didn't allow him to do so. If that agreement was signed in 1962 war would not have happened, and all the troubles, including the present dispute in Pang Song So Lake and Galwan Valley, all those things would not have happened there. Anyway, 1962, what a watershed year, because India never thought that China could muster, such large number of troops across the mighty Himalayas and just literally pour into Indian-held areas and just devastate both in Western Front and also Eastern Front, where they captured the whole of Arunachal Pradesh, but they withdrew back. But Aksai Chin, they are holding on because it is strategically not important to India, but it is very important for them, because it's the only area through which they were able to connect Ladakh and Xinjiang, the two far-flung provinces, always the trouble-making provinces, because Han Chinese were not majority at that time, neither in Tibet nor in Xinjiang. So they wanted an all-weather road connecting that. Say they would not have given on Aksai Chin. But India could have asked for concessions in all other areas. We missed a golden opportunity in 1960. And unfortunately, we are paying the price right now. So many people criticize Nehru for his Tibet policy. I don't think so, because Tibet was always under the control of China, and it is a done thing. You can't change it, whether how much, as I said in the last video, I would like Dalai Lama to go back again to Tibet and become the de facto ruler of Tibet, but it is not going to happen, because if wishes were horses, then all of us can fly. But we have to accept the ground reality. The pragmatism is the most important thing in deciding your policies, including foreign policy. So this is the ground situation right now. This is the area which is under Chinese control, and this shaded area, it has been part of northern areas, but due to strategic reasons, China has asked for it, and China and Pakistan have signed an agreement into which Pakistan has given this area, it's called Shashkam Valley, to China. And this area is under northern areas and control of Pakistan, and similarly this area, which is geographically not part of Kashmir, but geographically part of Jammu, Muzaffarpur area, is also under the control of Pakistan since 1947-48. So as I said, what is the impact of all these wars on India? I am not really concerned about the impact on China and Pakistan. So I am specifically talking about the impact of such wars on India. So the Indian economy suffered so badly because of the war. It is not only about the amount of money you transfer from developmental things into army. You set back the development by few decades, and all the time and energy of the policy makers is on devising military strategy, not thinking about the basic things, providing basic amenities, education, health, food, infrastructure building. The first plan, of course, the 5-year plans were created by the architect of modern India, Jawaharlal Nehru. The first plan was a very, this didn't have an ambitious target at all. The target was only 2.1, but it was 3.6. We almost doubled the target. The second plan, 56 to 61, before the war. So, of course, the first Pakistan war was 47-48. It was before the creation of the plan. So I can't give any data for that. 4.5. and 4.3, almost we achieved it. Now comes the third part of it. You see that 1950, 61, 63, third plan, 5.6 Shastri years, but 2.4. This is the period we fought two disastrous wars, 1962 war with China and 1965 war with Pakistan. So the projected, the actual growth rate was not even 40% of the target growth rate. Same thing, fourth plan, 1969 to 74, in which we fought the 1971-72 Bangladesh, very successful militarily, but economically we see it is disastrous. 5.6 was the target, actual growth rate was 3.3. This is what we call it, the Greeks would call it as a Pyrrhic victory, Pyrrhic. It means that you may have won the war, but the cost at which you have done winning the war is so disastrous that the victory doesn't mean anything at all. It is as good as a defeat. So economically it sets us back. In fact, the reason why India has grown a lot in the 80s, in the 90s, the growth rate increased to more than 5% in the 80s. The same thing was maintained in the 90s, and in the 2000 we reached 12% growth rate under the glorious years of 2005 to 2009. That is not only because of the economic change, but due to the peace dividend, what I call it as a peace dividend. No wars were fought since 1972 because we have fixed the line of control with Pakistan, except in Siachen Glacier where some minor skirmishes happen. But no major war has been fought by India since 1972. That is the peace dividend. We can focus all our energy, all our finances on developmental things. So that is the most important thing. The jingoistic people, the hawks will keep on telling you, because you are not going to force. Because as you can see that, I'll give you some more data to buttress my points. So India's, this is official data, military expenditure is $71 billion. That is because I want to compare with Pakistan and China, but in rupees, if I say, that is 4.7 lakh crores. It is the official budget, this year budget, 2020-21 budget given by our great intellectual Nirmala Sethuraman ji. But if you see the Union government's education budget, it is around 98,000 crores. And if you see the health budget allocation is around 69,000 crores. Put together, it is 1.65 lakh crore, education and health, whereas defense budget is 4.75 lakh crores. So that is 2.5 times more. What we are spending on defense is 2.5 times more than what we are spending, Union government spending on education and health. This is the reason why India is still a third world country, and our rank and score in United Nations, the UNDPs, HDI are so low. We cannot grow because we are spending too much on defense, because we have unsettled borders with both Pakistan and China. So India's defense military expenditure is 71. China, of course, much bigger economy, so $262 billion. You can say that it is around 3.5 times more, but China's economy is around 5 times more than that of India. So that means India is spending much more in terms of percentage of GDP, 2.1%, whereas China is spending only 1.85% of its GDP. The problem with Pakistan is they are spending, their aim is always to militarily match India because of the wars they have fought, and they have not forgotten 1971-72. They want revenge for the dismemberment of Pakistan in 1971-72. So they are spending very small amount when you compare with India, $11 billion. That is India's military expenditure is around 6.5 times more. But you see the comparatively the Indian economy is around $3 trillion. Whereas Pakistan, in terms of nominal GDP, whereas Pakistan economy is $300 billion. Indian economy is 10 times more than that of Pakistan. But Pakistan's military expenditure is only 1/6 of India. So that means they are spending much more than, so that is the reason as a percentage of GDP, they are spending 3.6%. That means they cannot focus upon building infrastructure, pathetic infrastructure, roads, railways, no industries. The incremental capital output ratio is very high. Whereas China has focused upon its infrastructure. That is why it became the factory of the world. Because of huge improvements in its railway, in its ports, in its airports, they are able to reduce the manufacturing cost. So that is why nobody can beat China in manufacturing there. India is not able to do so, but Pakistan is disastrous. So do you want to go increase the military expenditure, keep on fighting your jingoistic chest thumping wars and make people die? Yes, in the war you may capture some territory and you may lose some territory. Few hundreds of Jawans may die, maybe thousands may die. But if you keep on doing that, millions of people will slowly die. People will die of hunger and of poverty, and people will wallow in illiteracy. This is the disaster brought by war. So, can you win a war? People talk about fighting war with India and China and all that. Is it possible? So, 2 days back, Stockholm Institute of Peace Research, which is the nodal agency for this, has said that India has got 150 nuclear weapons, whereas Pakistan itself has got 160, and China has got more than double. So, with the nuclear armed enemy, there is no victory at all, because Pakistan doesn't have no first use policy. If they think that they will lose a conventional war over Kashmir, they won't hesitate to use nuclear weapons, particularly targeting mega cities like Greater Delhi and Greater Bombay, killing, massacring thousands of people. Of course, India will also do the same thing in Lahore. Lahore you can't do because it's too close to Indian border. Karachi, Islamabad can be devastated with retaliatory strikes. But is it winning? Is what called a Pyrrhic victory. You kill my people, I will kill your people. Is not a victory for either. It's a loss. It's a lose-lose situation, not a win-win situation. The same thing, if you talk about, I am deliberately not talking about the number of soldiers, because modern warfare is not about soldiers at all. It is about, the wars are now fought from thousands of kilometers away from missiles. India's longest missile Agni is 5,000 kilometers. It can't even reach Hong Kong. Forget about Beijing and Shanghai, the two major cities of China. But all Indian cities and population, including Kanyakumari, is also within the range of Dongfeng 41 Chinese missile with 15,000 kilometers. And even Pakistan has 2,500 meters, but Shaheen ballistic missile, that is enough to cover from Lahore. If they launch, it can even reach Guwahati and beyond. So whole of India is within Pakistan's range. Whole of Pakistan is within India's range. But not even half of China is within India's missile range. So that is a problem. So China has huge advantage in naval warfare, particularly in submarines. The bracket I have given 16, 74 and 8 are about submarines. And China has mastery over naval, because their aim is to not to take on India, but to take on the US supremacy both in Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. That's a different story altogether. So China enjoys a huge advantage in conventional warfare over India. And if as I said, in 1971 Indira Gandhi prevented China from joining Pakistan in a war with India by starting the war in winter. But today that is immaterial, because the wars are not physically fought by Chinese army crossing into Indian army across the process in the mighty Himalayas, because they will just rain missiles on India or just pour bombs with their long range fighters and bombers, etc. there. So the whole idea of Pakistan has developed long range cruise missiles which are impossible to detect. India's maximum cruise missile BrahMos is having a range of 290 kilometers, whereas Pakistan's Babar cruise missiles are 700 kilometers. And in February this year, before the lockdown, they have tested a air version of that missile also. That has a range of 600 kilometers. From Lahore to Delhi, it is only 450 kilometers. That means a Pakistani plane can still be in Pakistani airspace and fire this missile, nuclear tipped missile, probably into Delhi, destroying millions of people, killing millions of people and infrastructure. So that is a danger. You can't win any war right now, because you can keep talking about 56 inches and people who have no idea about the war, the misery it brings, and the development will be set back by decades. So we have, last 2 decades or so, we have brought millions of people out of poverty. Though India still has a maximum number of poor people below the poverty line, people who are earning less than $1.7 per day, as per World Bank's estimates. India has a maximum population. We can't afford to, because already coronavirus has destroyed the livelihoods and lives of people, migrant laborers. We know their plight. Are you going to foolishly start another war? And India will be devastated if there will be a two-front war. With even with Pakistan, it is impossible to win outright any war, simply because of the nuclear weapons. Secondly, India has conventional superiority over Pakistan, fighter aircraft or tanks. Okay, this is something wrong. It's not 3.6 tanks. naval ships, everything India has superiority. But traditionally, India has armed forces around 1.13 lakh. Pakistan has around 6 lakh. So roughly around 1 is 2 is to 1. Traditionally, military strategy. The war is, of course, is not going in horses, taking your sword or lances and shouting Har Har Mahadev. It is not that kind of war we can fight these days. Still, conventionally, it is said that an attacking army need to have 5 times more force than the defending army. Whereas even in numerical soldiers, India has only around 2 times more strength than Pakistan. So it is not possible to win any war at all. The thing is very simple. We have to sit down and talk and resolve all the whatever issues we have. As I already said, the 1960 Zhou Enlai formula, that India has to accept that Aksai Chin as part of this thing, and China will accept that Arunachal Pradesh will be part of India, should be the starting point. Because you are not going to physically, you are not going to retake Aksai Chin. It is not possible at all for India, because China is going to become a global superpower, whether you like it or not. I definitely don't like it, but you can't change it. You are powerless. Even US cannot change it. Trump tries his best, but he himself cannot do anything about that. So, but China may not accept it right now, because they may want the Tawang route. At that time, they were ready to give up the claims even on Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh. Now they may not. But we need to talk. We have to give and take and do that. Same thing is also true with the Pakistan also. If you say that I won't talk, you are increasing the tensions. Of course, peace has two meanings. One is external peace, that peace and tranquility along the borders. That there is no need for army to be patrolling the borders. Only the border security agencies like BSF, Indo-Tibetan Border Force, and Pakistani side, their rangers should be patrolling it. We should de-escalate. We should disengage. But the second part of the peace is internal peace. That means there should be, in India in the last 6 or 7 years, there has been, nobody will invest because of law and order problem. The state or deep state, what you call as a deep state, could create a riot, a communal riot anytime they want it, because they want to win some state election or the national elections. Deep state, it's a one which really controls that state. In US, it is the military industrial complex, the big corporates. In Pakistan, it is ISI. Whereas in India, it is a Nagpur-based organization, which is a deep state. They want to create this ferment, because that will give them electoral dividends. But when there is no internal peace, when there is no external peace, a country cannot develop. This is the bottom line. The so-called nationalists are actually anti-nationals, because without understanding the reality, without even having an iota of understanding of basic economics, basic finances, they are just trumping up, 56 years मैं सबक सिखाऊंगा, मैं एक सर काटेंगे तो मैं 100 सर काटूंगा, kind of things are good to maybe to win elections, but you are doing a great disservice to the millions of people who are below poverty or just above poverty, who will be pushed back into poverty because of your foolish policies, and you are never going to win any war also, neither a conventional war and definitely not a nuclear war. We are going to kill them, and we are at the same time we are going to die ourselves. Do you want that?